What is the best way to value bet in poker? Imagine you're sitting at the table, holding a decent hand on the river, and you want to squeeze the most value out of it. How do you do that without scaring your opponent away? That's what we're here to figure out. Value betting is all about getting called by worse hands while avoiding losing extra chips to better hands. The key is to size your bet just right. If you bet too small, you leave money on the table. If you bet too big, you risk making your opponent fold. The goal is to find that perfect middle ground where you maximize your winnings. Start by considering how much your opponent is willing to call. If they tend to call large bets with weaker hands, you can bet more confidently for value. For example, if your opponent will call up to $50, betting around $40 can bring in more chips over time than betting $55 and scaring them off. But if they only call small bets, you might want to bet less to keep them in the pot. Next, think about your hand's strength and the board texture. When you have the nuts or the best possible hand, value betting is straightforward. Any call is behind or tied, so you want to bet enough to get paid. When your hand is weaker but still strong, like top pair or to pair, you need to be more cautious. Thin value bets can be tempting, but if your opponent has a better hand, you could lose a lot of chips. The river is often the best spot to extract maximum value. Larger bets on the river can scare off aggressive opponents but also encourage calls from weaker hands. If you bet too small, you might not get enough value. If you bet too big, you risk losing the entire pot if your opponent raises or folds. The trick is to size your river bet based on what your opponent is likely to call and how much you want to protect your hand. Balancing your value bets with bluffs is also important. If you only bet big with strong hands, opponents will catch on and fold more often. Mixing in smaller bets or occasional bluffs keeps your play unpredictable. Remember, value betting is not just about getting called. It's about making your opponent think twice before folding. Understanding how much your hand is worth in the current situation is essential. Think about your hand's equity, the chance it has of winning if called, and how likely your opponent is to fold. If your hand has high equity and your opponent is likely to call, a larger bet is usually correct. If they tend to fold often, smaller bets or even checking might be better to avoid losing value. Before you make a bet, estimate how much your opponent will call based on their tendencies and the current board. Adjust your bet size accordingly to maximize your expected value. When you have a very strong hand on the river, go for a bigger bet to maximize your winnings. If your hand is marginal, consider smaller bets or checking to avoid giving away free cards or losing value. Always remember your position. Being last to act gives you more information and control over the size of your bet. You can see what your opponent does and adjust your bet to get the most value. In the end, the best way to value bet in poker is to carefully size your bets to extract the most chips from weaker hands, considering your opponent's tendencies, your hand strength, and the situation at the table. Mixing in some bluffs and being aware of the board texture will help you become a more effective and profitable value bettor over time.